The typical Rust wipe consists of planning and hitting very juicy profit rate, followed by taking a giant silo run and then some well-deserved rest. And that's exactly the time when those pesky battlemetric offliners tend to strike. But what if I told you that there is a way to protect not only your loot, but also your sleep schedule? Hey guys, Hyperion here, and today we will be diving into the topic of raid detection and ways to utilize the seismic sensor comfortably and efficiently. We will also discover a way to better flex on the pathetic zerg that failed to raid us and wasted all their boom. So enough yapping and let's jump right into it. We all know the seismic sensor. It's a simple component that requires 1 rust watt of power to operate. It sends out 1 to 3 rust watts for 3 seconds after it detects an explosive in its radius. The most common and simple way to use it is to directly connect a smart alarm to its output. The smart alarm will then send a message onto your phone if you have it paired with the Rust Plus, of course. As simple as this setup is, it does leave a lot to be desired. One of the main flaws is that it will send out a notification no matter what type of explosive it detects. The base detection range of the seismic sensor is 30 meters in a sphere radius. That's equal to 10 square foundations. We can of course edit the detection radius in the range of 1 to 30 meters, either by typing the number or dragging the slider. Each explosive or raiding tool falls under one of 3 tiers. For tier 1 like this F1 grenade, the seismic sensor will output 1 power. We can see that by it lighting up only the first light. That of course will only happen if the explosive is detected in the radius that's set on the sensor. Here we can see a list of all explosions that count as tier 1. Note that those tiers have nothing to do with the workbench they are crafted at, and it's purely how the seismic sensor sees them. For tier 2 explosives like this explosive ammo, the sensor will output 2 power. The same does apply for all the tier 2 explosives. As a fun fact, the battering ram and the hammerhead bolt shot from ballista also does count as an explosive, and therefore it is detected by the seismic sensor. Obviously we are missing the tier 3 explosives, which will trigger an output of 3 power. In this tier only sits the rocket, C4 and MLRS rocket. The seismic sensor is telling us that its maximum range is 30 meters, right? Right now this low wall is 10 foundations away from the sensor, so that's supposed to be the maximum detection range. As we can see, any explosion inside of the 30 meters triggers our sensor and those outside of it get ignored. But in reality that isn't true. There is a half meter of hidden bonus radius to account for wall thickness or slight misplacement, so we are working with a 30.5 meter radius. Now that we know all the details about the sensor itself, we can start expanding our detection circuit. As mentioned previously, this setup has a giant flaw. It does detect every single tier of explosive. That is good on its own, but we don't want to be woken up by Rust Blast just because of some random grenades, landmines or patrol helicopters. The solution is surprisingly simple. All we need to do is to put a branch right behind the sensor and take the power out of the branch into the smart alarm, in this case lights. By setting the branch to 1, we will filter out all the tier 1 explosives, so only the tier 2 and above will trigger. We can of course filter out the tier 2 also by setting the branch to 2, then only rockets, C4 and MLRS will be detected. How about we detect each tier of explosives separately so we will know how big of a threat is facing our base. If we chain 2 branches that are set to 1 via power out and connect our smart alarms in this order, from top to bottom being tier 3, 2 and 1. Each of the different explosive tiers can be set to different message on our Rust Plus. We can of course leave an output empty if we don't care about that particular tier to be detected. But there is still an issue of the lower tiers being detected along with the higher ones, resulting in sending a message for tier 1 and 2 if just explosive ammo was detected. If only there would be a way to filter out just the one explosive tier that we care about without triggering all of the lower ones, right? All that we will need are 2 branches, 2 memory cells, seismic sensor and a single splitter. First we will chain 2 branches next to each other and set them to 1. The second branch will then send its power out into a seismic sensor. Next we will need to place 2 memory cells and hook both of the branch outs of our previously placed branches into the reset side inputs of both of the memory cells. For better visualization, I will be using a red wire here to signify its negative meaning, resetting the memory cell in this case. Now, when both of our memory cells are getting permanently reset, those reset inputs have no active usage on the battery by the way, we will be placing a splitter on top of our sensor and powering it from its output. Don't worry if you are getting a little bit lost already. You can always check out the diagram linked in the description or browse all of them in my Discord. Anyway, it is important to take note of the splitter's outputs. The order here really matters. Output 1 will be directly powering the bottom memory cell. That memory cell will then send power from its output into the second memory cell. This way we established power flow to both memory cells if explosion is detected. All that's left is to connect output 2 of the splitter into the set input of our first memory cell and output 3 into the set input of the second memory cell. Here I am using a green wire to signify a positive meaning, setting the memory cell. Now in a regular wipe we would of course connect those outputs into smart alarms or RF broadcasters for larger bases, but here we are just gonna be using some simple industrial lights for demonstration purposes. The order of the explosive tiers is the same as in our previous example, going from top to bottom from tier 3 to tier 1. So how does this compare to our previous simple setup? Let's see. For a tier 1 explosive, the results are exactly the same, only the tier 1 light gets activated, so far no difference in here. Moving on to tier 2 explosive ammo, and here we can see that in our simple setup both tier 1 and tier 2 lights got activated, but in our filtered setup only the proper tier 2 did. The same of course apply for tier 3. And again, in the simple setup all of the tiers are activated, meanwhile the filtered one only registers the tier 3 explosion. This way we now have a super simple filter to exactly know what tier of rating is happening so we can act accordingly. So how does this even work? First of all, we have our main branch which delivers 3 power to this whole circuit and then the 2 that are permanently resetting our memory cells with 1 rust watt each. We are left with 1 power that powers the seismic sensor and it is the only active usage in this circuit. So, if a tier 1 explosive is registered by the sensor, it will send out 1 rust watt of power into the splitter. The splitter then attempts to split power into 3 outputs, but since there is only 1 rust watt, it will all go into the first output and then into the first memory cell. And because of the memory cell is in reset mode, it will output that 1 power through its inverted output right into our tier 1 signal. How about tier 2 explosion then? If that one gets detected, the sensor sends out 2 power into the splitter, which will get split into output 1 and output 2. Output 1 will again go to the first memory cell, but now instead of passing through its inverted output into the first light, it will instead go through its regular output into the second memory cell. Well, why is that? That's because the output 2 of our splitter is sending 1 power into the set side input of the first memory cell and therefore switching it into the set mode. You may have noticed that both of the set and the reset side input of the memory cell are receiving power at the same time. If that is happening, the set input will always take priority over the reset input no matter what. But as soon as the set input stops receiving power, the memory cell will reset. And that's the whole interaction we are using here. After the main power reaches the second memory cell, it will pass through its inverted output again into our second light. For tier 3 explosion, basically the same is happening again. Output 1 of the splitter goes all the way to the second memory cell because of the output 2 is setting the first memory cell. Now output 3 is added into the mix because tier 3 explosive makes seismic sensor to send out 3 rust watts of power. This third output will set the second memory cell and redirect the main power into its regular output and into the third light. I have stated previously that this circuit needs 3 rust watts to operate but only drains 1 from a battery, aka active usage. If we would want to min-max the power consumption, we would add a small battery right here and feed it with constant 2 rust watts of power or simply hook it up to a random solar panel. This is especially useful if it is far away, let's say in your externals. What I personally really like to do, especially for bigger bases, is to use RF broadcasters instead of directly wiring the outputs into smart alarms. Each of those broadcasters will be set to its own frequency depending on the explosive tier. This way I can have multiple of those circuits around the base, compound or even external flank bases connected to the same alarm. this same system can also trigger any other circuits that are set to this frequency. For example, a base lockdown, which you can check out in the top corner of the screen right now. As for the central alarm system, we will need a small battery with just a single rustwatt of input, 3 branches, 3 RF receivers, 3 timers, 3 smart alarms, and a single splitter. We start by aligning the 3 branches and keeping them set to 2, then simply chain them from the power out into the next branch. Follow that by placing 3 RF receivers and setting them to the proper frequencies, in the same order as we set the RF broadcasters. Now we obviously need to provide some power for our receivers, so each one of them will get a branch out from one of our previously placed branches. Now we just slap down a splitter and provide it with some juice from our last branch. Placing the 3 timers and giving them power from the splitter in no particular order would be the next step. Now it's good time to decide how much do we want to get spammed if an explosive will be detected. By setting the timer to a number of seconds, we will make sure that in that long of a window, the same tier of alarm won't be sent out again. This is a way to prevent your phone getting spammed every second if, for example, someone is shooting explosive ammo. We can of course set up a different delay timer depending on the explosive tier, since we probably want to get notified more in a rocket pummel scenario compared to few satchels exploding. So let's connect the RF receiver's outputs into each of our timer's side inputs, so they will get activated according to the explosion detected. And again, in a while we'll be of course using smart alarms instead of those lights. Let's see how it compares to the simple setup again. As long as the light is activated, that means one message is being sent to Rust+. This way, the circuit won't be able to send any other until the first one runs out. As we can see, the simple setup will be able to trigger again every 3 seconds no matter what explosive is detected. This system in general is my go-to setup. It is fairly simple and fast to put down with an endless possibility for expansion. Just add another sensor setup anywhere that you want without the need to give the whole team new smart alarms again and again. Have you ever wondered how much boom did those failed raiders use on you? Do you want to expose them in the global chat? Or maybe just to boost your own ego? No matter for what purpose you decide to use it, I am presenting you the boom counting circuit. So let's build it, shall we? We will need 6 branches, 4 counters, 3 memory cells, 2 seismic sensors, 2 splitters, 2 blockers, and a small battery. It's gonna be a rapid fire, so hold on tightly. You can always pause the video at any point or use the diagram as a reference. We will be again using some simple color coding to make better sense of this. Green is meant as a positive connection, in this case that will be setting a memory cell or incrementing counter up. Red is a negative connection, right now that will only be to reset a memory cell. And yellow for special function like clearing a counter. The default black is just a simple power flow without any added function. Again, you can find link to this diagram in the video's description or in my Discord. And here it is in all of its glory, the boom counter. It does ignore all the tier 1 explosions because we don't really care about those. Any tier 2 explosion though will add 1 to the bottom set of 2 counters. Those bottom counters count the amount of tier 2 explosions and the top pair does the same for tier 3 explosions. As we can see, the counting is alternating between both counters. So to know how much boom was used, we just simply need to add the first count to the second one to get the final value. Right now that will be 7 of tier 2 boom. Tier 3, which are rockets, C4 and MLRS, are getting counted in the upper row. Anyway, this circuit operates by the same mechanics of filtering outputs as the previous one, with some added logic to be able to count every single explosion. On top of that, we have added some components to prevent double triggers, aka single explosions to be counted multiple times. There are of course some in-game limitations that we cannot bypass. For example, if 10 rockets or C4 explode exactly at the same time, the circuit will only be able to count 3 of them. But that is really unlikely to happen, only maybe in the case of high amount of C4 that are remotely detonated. As you have noticed, I have added simple buttons that are here to reset the counters back to 0. This is completely optional step. It is also completely viable to use this circuit with Rust Plus to be notified only after a certain amount of boom was used. This will prevent false notifications if someone just shoots random explosive ammo onto your base. But on that topic, maybe some other time. I think this will be it to keep your head spinning for a little while. Let me know down in the comments what is the biggest raid that you have ever defended and how sweet the W was. And with that, I will see you in the next one.